Welcome to Property Quorum. Now, the keen-eyed amongst you will notice that the usual suspects are here. Welcome, Juliet Babulala, of course, Image Clay of Sutton Bay, and our old stalwart, Chris Gilson of Route Home. But we're joined by a special guest, Silas J. Lees of WigglyWam, a platform that we champion, but is absolutely a game changer in the property field. But we'll talk more about that later. Today's topic is about something that perhaps will shake everything up once again, like we need that, in the renters department. That is the Renters' Rights Bill, the Renters' Reform Bill. But of course, as per usual, to start us off, Hamish McClay.
Well, before certain things come into place, I guess we have that sort of aspect of being sort of human. There is this fear of what is it going to do? What is it going to actually upset? Well, it's a little bit late for that now. What we need to do, as it was passed in Parliament yesterday evening, how did we manage the timing? I don't know. However, as it was passed, and sadly to me, I always felt that the House of Lords at least was one of those stabilising factors in bringing bills into Acts of Parliament. But unfortunately, not that our King is going to be terribly pleased that we're not into politics. So anyway, the King will be experiencing the approach of our Prime Minister as he wends his way towards Buckingham Palace to ask for the introduction of this particular bill into the sort of framework. Well, sadly, what wasn't given last night was what the timing is. So what we need to be doing, many of us who are involved within property, is not so much fearing, but seeing what we can do given these new circumstances that have just been imposed upon us. And there are a few experts that we have here today who are more in a position to be able to sort of put that in perspective than I am. So I think it'll be interesting to see what others feel about the situation. There's no guessing as to what the timing is. Sometimes we expect these things to be introduced the following year. However, there's no telling, because it was one of those things that the several things involved with this Renters' Rights Bill that the government wanted to introduce as soon as they got into power. So here we are 15 or so months later, and it was about to happen.
Good Lord. I think we'll start, first of all, with dear Juliet. Juliet, should we be fearful of the Renters' Reform Bill?
It depends on which side you're looking at. If you're the tenant, then, the intention is to protect you. And, I saw, funnily, I don't know the algorithms, and sometimes you have conversations and they pick things up. And I saw something on TikTok where a family had gone abroad for a bit, and they rent their house out on a short term let, and they came back and the tenant just wouldn't leave. And the advice that they got from the local authority was, don't leave, because you need to get sort of emergency housing. And right. So if you left voluntarily, you're voluntarily homeless. And so you kind of think, in a system like that, how is the renters or the Renters' Rights Bill going to help? It's a broken system. And the fact that you haven't got timescales and timing means that you've got people, again, making decisions that don't quite understand the game. And so, it's all going to go in uproar. The AST hasn't been a bad thing, or the protections on there haven't been a bad thing. I do agree that landlords need to serve, the right to rent information, have up-to-date EPCs and things like that, because they have been, people that lost lives when gas, for example, was emitted. Gas is something you don't smell. So you can inhale that throughout the night and die. And I get that. Like, you have to have a gas safety certificate. But at the end of the day, to sort of, put all of these onerous implications on the landlord, it's just going to squeeze landlords out of the market. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. So you go to court, and immediately a landlord is seen as the more powerful of the two. That's not necessarily the case where you've got a tenant who knows the system, knows the game. I remember once, this wasn't a tenancy situation, it was an eviction of an owner of a property. And we had 21 evictions with this guy because every time we had an eviction date, he knew exactly what to say to get the eviction withdrawn or rejected, and there would be a new hearing date, wasting time and cost. But he knew exactly how to play the game. And if you've got tenants like that, then this bill is not going to help landlords.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, I'm going to pass straight over to our favorite developer, Chris Gilsman. Chris, is this going to be a screaming nightmare for you, or is it just another speed bump in the road?
It's at the moment, it's for our acquisition side, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. We're finding that it is true that there are lots of landlords that are exiting the market. We're running a direct-to-vendor pipeline, and pretty much every call that we get is from a landlord who's looking to offload their stock. They're all looking to sell up, and for some reason they're all moving to either Thailand or Cambodia. That's the flavour of the month at the moment. But yeah, they're done. They've had enough. So these are traditionally landlords who have been working a primary job, and being a landlord has been their secondary income, and they've just been squirreling money away over the last 40 to 50 years and putting it into bricks and mortar. So they've just accrued property, and yeah, been a landlord in their spare time. And yeah, they're just at this stage where they're like, well, I can't own it in my own name with lending anymore without getting taxed or without being able to offset the lending. And I've got all these additional regulations that I didn't used to have, and there's all this and all this and all this and all this, and the list is never ending. So yeah, I get that they have been bashed over their head for decades, really, and squeezed. So I find it quite strange, given that the AST was, back when it came out in 89-90, is one of the fundamental building blocks of the buy-to-let movement. It actually exploded the industry because it provided that level of security for owners of property to be able to rent them out, but knowingly be able to get their properties back. And what they've done is now done a rug pull on us some 20, 30 years later, and say, well, no, you can't do that anymore. So people kind of hark back to they're not completely stupid. They do remember a quarter of a century ago and what the situation was, and how bad it was being a landlord at that point in time.
Yeah.
So yeah, they see the writings on the wall. So I'm quite empathetic to some of the people who are looking to just cash out, and if I can help them move on and get a reasonable price for their stock and let them get on with their lives, and I can repurpose it and do what I need to do with it, then yeah, it's kind of win-win.
But hang on, does that mean that all these so-called accidental landlords will pretty much diminish, and all you're going to end up with is with landlords, potential landlords who have already got vast tracts of homes, have set themselves up so they can cope with all these things? You're going to end up with very few people just holding houses because they've accrued them, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think the PRS is still built up of hugely so of those individual landlords. I think mid-80s percentage still of that PRS block. They own just a couple of houses. So the smaller landlords, they do make up the bulk of that PRS. So actually getting their backup, making it so that they don't want to rent, does have quite a big impact on the changing dynamic of the market, with them exiting. At the moment, the corporate landlords, it's only still a small amount, but I think this will start to open the floodgates towards the likes of the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, hoovering everything up. So yeah, it's on the horizon. It's not in anyone's best interest, really.
Hence going towards that German model that we know so well. Silas, is this, in inverted commas, a good thing? It seems to me that in a world so full of extremes, this is just another extreme swing of the pendulum. Before it was all the landlord's way, now it's going to be all the tenant's way. Surely we should find a middle path.
That's an excellent question, Gareth. I think we're in a lose-lose-win situation. And what I mean by that is landlords are losing because, as Chris has excellently articulated, exactly what's going on in the market. You've got those amateur landlords who've got one or two properties are being squeezed out of the market. So we have less housing stock. The tenants are losing because less housing stock means similar or elevated demand, which means rent prices go up. And then the win element is most likely the corporate landlords who are not going to be affected at the same level as the amateurs with corporate legislation and everything else. They've got the structure in place to accommodate for that. But I don't think this is actually solving the problem. If we look back in history, prior to the buy-to-let boom, we had a local authority system that provided some element of council housing. And that, as we know, throughout the Thatcher years was mostly sold off without being replenished. And that's where the core problem has come from. So as Chris quite rightly said, we had, and Juliet as well, we had the AST that came in alongside buy-to-let lending that fueled this boom in people like everyday people like us going, do you know what, actually, I can buy a property, I can do it up as I would want to live in myself, house tenants in it, and they're quite happy to live there for 5-10 years. They might move on because they've expanded their family, but we provided good quality accommodation. And I think this is a sledgehammer to crack a walnut that yes, there will always be problems within any kind of market, but trying to legislate for the 5% of the market that is rogue landlords operating slum properties, it to me is just madness, because it's having the opposite effect of what it's trying to create, in my humble opinion.
Hamish, as you say, the upper house was always there, without getting too political, to effectively give another read on an act to prevent idiocy, but it seems to have not really played its part this time around.
Idiocy or not, I think it's the balancing aspect which is which is missing. We have at the moment, and it does happen. We do have a large we do have a large number, if you like, of overload in terms of the House of Parliament, and that whatever is said can be pushed forward. Yeah. We're finding things being pushed forward even without discussing in Parliament at the moment, which is a sad thing. I think the difficulty is twofold. We have actually sort of seen there was a major attempt by the Conservative government when they were in place to try and do something about the Building Safety Act, and there was almost pressure put on them. Hey, we've got to get this done because it's been so long since Grenfell. So they pushed forward something which wasn't quite right, but they pushed it forward because there was a need to push it forward. I've had a situation here now where I think there was a need to push something forward. I think somebody's trying to do something constructive about the housing market. This wasn't it. And there's a lot of things which aren't it. This is not going to help any housing at all. In fact, has been indicated by the last three people speaking, is going to minimize the availability. Now, when we speak about percentages, it doesn't matter what the percentages are, because it's such a serious issue now. The number of people who are under pressure to find home, who are homeless, is getting worse and worse and worse. You combine that with the number of people that are coming into this country that obviously demand and need housing. If you're not actually going to do something to improve and make available more properties, it is bound to create challenges. And I don't see this particular act, as it becomes in within the next sort of few weeks, I don't see this actually helping the situation at all.
Juliet, do you think that this move might in fact embolden house builders or small time builders? Because if rentals are going to become the domain of the corporate, then surely all of us who don't want to be stuck in renting, we're going to have to be looking forward to building houses or improving existing houses.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going back to what Hamish said, the objective has been lost. the act comes across as really punitive. So if your objective is creating housing, how does punishing landlords help? I mean, you look at a typical landlord and you're talking about, yes, these amateurs, okay? They are getting rental income. They are paying self-assessment and tax on that rental income. They're incurring additional costs to get all this certification, etc. They then have a tenant who's not paying, and they are obliged to pay their rent irrespective of that tenant not paying. They then decide to sell that house and they've got to pay capital gains on it. How punitive of a system have we got? And it's not just about creating housing, but it's about creating an economy that floats. And when you plug one area, it's just going to have a stoppage and it's going to have a stopgap. It's going to affect everyone. And that, I think, is something that needs to be looked at. And I'm saying this on a generic perspective, but the ones who have the data, the ones who can look at this from a microscopic view and actually dissect it and review it, need to do that. And in every which area, this new government and these socialist views have just messed up so many areas for us that you feel like you're living in a almost debilitating society now.
It certainly seems punitive. Chris, although you're making hay at the moment, being as your main focus is to hoover up the accidental landlords, as it were, such that you can then turn them into more usage for all those many ever-increasing number of mouths to feed who need to have somewhere to live, this can't be a permanent ongoing process. It's got to find balance somewhere, has it not?
I think it will, yes. Where it remains to be seen. I agree entirely with Juliet. It's like these policymakers are listening to this piece of legislation is just one of those examples of he who shouts loudest is being listened to, but the person who's shouting loudest is normally the nutter who's rocking in the corner. It's like no one should be listening to them. We don't need legislation like this.
Of course, in any given nightclub, it's usually me that's rocking in the corner. Silas, surely give us some good news. There must be a way forward that we can use this great circumstance change to benefit all.
Well, I applaud Juliet's passion and thank you for making me chuckle there, Chris, as well. I think I would love to see a silver lining here, and it's so difficult to look at everything of what's happening at the moment with positivity. When there comes along any change, there will always be some kind of opportunity, and people like Chris will benefit because you've got the knowledge and the resources to take advantage of it. But to echo Juliet's comments, I'm looking at the wider economic picture here. I do believe passionately, and I have for many years, that we have Credit Crunch 2.0 on the horizon. And I think if you look at the general economic situation of where we are, there is no confidence in where the economy is going. There is no confidence in growth. And to echo the point or the question that you mentioned earlier, Gareth, about this whole build to let scenario for developers, they're already frustrated at not being able to get sites through the planning system that's costing them tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds to get planning, or get planning refused at the final stage for no apparently good reason. And so we have elements of red tape that are basically choking the economy and are choking development, and that's actually stopping us from moving forward. I was listening to a video earlier where they were saying the consumption of fossil fuels, for example, is linked to economic prosperity. And we have this net zero agenda that's also brewing in the background to dampen the use of so-called fossil fuels. And you take all of this into the mix, it's really difficult to see a bright economic future without the scrapping of all of this nonsense and allowing us to move forward with hope in our hearts for an economic future that's going to benefit everyone.
Juliet, have we finally hit generation rent where the norm will be to rent from large corporations, that it will be unusual to find people holding homes just simply to make an extra buck?
Well, it's been made difficult for those types of landlords to hold homes, or people who, for example, my situation, before I got married, I had a flat. I moved in with my husband, and so I became a landlord because I decided to rent out the flat that I owned. That is not profitable to me, and the checks and balances, it's just too much. So yes, if this is what is happening, and it seems as though you're trying to squeeze out the amateur landlord from from the chain, which is not fair. And Hamish used the word balance. It should be about balance. It is inequitable at the moment, and that I can't see that being a fair thing at all.
Chris, can I have one last positive burst from you? Obviously, at the moment, things are swinging your way in as much as there's a glut of people looking to offload. But
it'll change. It goes in cycles. I'm just riding that wave at the moment. But Juliet's absolutely right. It is about equity, and yeah, I completely agree with what she said. It's not an equitable position at this point in time.
Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Well, it is unfortunate. We have, I think, far too many colliding aspects at this particular moment in time that really are just about any step you want to take. It has to be a guarded step. And because of that, if there isn't clarity, people aren't moving. And we know so well that obviously we are biased, those of us attending here, attending this particular podcast, that the state of the economy is reflected so much, if not contributed to, by what is going on in the housing sector. And we have a very, very peculiar state altogether, whatever it's somebody wanting to build, whatever it's somebody wanting to remediate, whether it's somebody wanting to actually sort of try and get some planning, they don't know what to plan for. And I think, sadly, this is a big impact. It's an impact in so many ways. It's an impact on the economy itself, because without that movement, we haven't got the new purchases going that take place as a consequence of somebody moving. So that's dropping down. So that's not adding to the economy. And we've also got the bigger challenge now. There are more and more people with fewer properties. As Chris has intimated, there are properties coming onto the market now. And of course, if they're coming onto the market, as much as a few of them will have tenants and will have sitting tenants, some of them will not have tenants at all, which is taking away from the housing market. So whichever direction we seem to be looking at the moment, it's not a positive sort of way. But Chris did indicate it's temporary. How temporary, we don't know. We don't know, but it would be lovely to actually sort of see something constructive coming through in the housing industry from something which at the very, very start, when we had this new government, they had so much that they wanted to do, wanted to achieve. And in fact, the opposite has happened.
Well, interestingly enough, your first phrase, colliding aspects, was the name of a prog rock band I was in the late 1990s. And I'm hoping that this phase is much like that band, quite temporary, and hoping that it redresses the balance through the swing of the pendulum, which Chris, hopefully, by providing us by that merest slither of a chink of light into a silver lining, can give us that happy thought that at some point normal service will resume. It only leaves me to thank Chris Gilson of Root Home, of course, Juliet Babula of Gunner Cook, our special guest, Silas J. Lees, and our Lord and Master, Hamish McClay of Search and Convey. And to you out there, thank you very much. I saw a rash of you suddenly turn up halfway through. I don't know, it must have been the joke that made Silas laugh. But please keep watching us as we hopefully plumb the depths of what is going on within the property market. Until next week, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and hopefully look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.